Recording in progress. Okay. It's going to be a great time.
Oh boy.
Okay. Does that sound interesting and cool?
Go. Damn, I look so good.
Let's just wing it. You ready?
4 hours later.
Yeah. Dear Tech.
That made me tired.
Oh, laughing hurts. Cut.
Dear Tech, the sky is falling. It's a wonky job market out there, so let's see if we can figure out what's going on. What do you think, Fran?
Wild times. We were literally just talking about it this morning. I think like overall perception and views, it's been a crazy year. I think really just obviously from the start of the pandemic, there's just been so much going on in the world, but I think specifically, I would say more centralized in the last 6 months, there has been so many mass layoffs. I know I've said to you and like so many people, I can't remember a time in my lifetime where it's ever been this aggressive in terms of volume of layoffs and the number of people that are being impacted right now. We were saying there was the announcement just today for Google that I believe it was 12,000 employees that were laid off. So we'll dive into it later. There's obviously a bunch of different perspectives here, but these are crazy times.
Yeah, I think every big company basically, right, it has laid off a significant number of people. And you're right, for our
in
career,
our industry, at least, I'll say, yeah.
In tech, yeah.
Yep.
But with that, being said, it's like very much like for people that have been through this, it's like 2008 vibes or 2001 vibes. Like it's a cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But very much like we're in that period of a lot of layoffs. But it's aside from that, there's also other things that are changing in the job market, right? It's a very much a shift of power from like what you said, from 6 months ago, where a lot of companies are back to office 4 days a week, maybe 5,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of people are speaking up against working from home, right? And so that's where we're at right now, where the market has shifted significantly.
Mm-hmm. 100%. What are the major companies that you're aware of, like in the last few months, that have had layoffs, like in the thousands?
So I think we did. There's Meta, Amazon, Google, Coinbase, Snap,
Microsoft was on there too.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
Essentially every company that's not every company. I shouldn't say that. Salesforce.
At that volume.
Yeah. The way and it comes from, well, I don't know if we want to jump to how we got here, but it does, a lot of it comes from where we were in the last couple of years in terms of tech hiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tech hiring in 2001, 2002. So here I said 2001, 2002. What I meant to say was 2021, 2022. Sorry, COVID time warp is an excuse, but I don't know if that works here. But yeah, my bad. Back to your show. I think it was like the hottest tech job market ever.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to maybe the .com boom, where it's like, you're a software developer, come here, come to us. And I think right now there's a bit of a correction going on. And it kind of comes with the territory, right? Where there was a period of time where everything seemed hunky-dory, and now the economy's a little unsure. But even aside from a recession point of view, I think it's also it's more so a correction independent of the looming recession.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, because of the volume of hiring.
Yeah, like whenever everyone's stocks was through the roof, so they had a lot of money to play with, and now that's kind of changed, so they don't have as much money to play with, which I get. What else? So on the way here, essentially, like getting to this point of where we're at in the market, do you think it was just over hiring, or like what do you think that journey was for the last now 3 years? It's January 2023, and I think January 2020 is when everything started. So what do you think?
That's a good question. Like I definitely think, I don't know if over hiring or excessive hiring, however you want to term it, is 100% a big factor. Like I know a year ago, we would consistently have candidates who had 4 or 5 offers. And it was becoming the norm that every candidate that we worked with we're considering on the tech side of the house had multiple different offers from Fortune 500, like large as well as startups, offers that they were considering, and that the power sat with the candidate. Like if you were a highly skilled candidate, there are multiple people seeking you out, and then in turn, obviously, you as that candidate have that leverage in offer negotiations, in asking for more than perhaps historically you would have, or as we're moving towards now today, that power shift you mentioned. So I definitely think overhiring is a big part of it. I do think when we talk about all of the streaming services and the competition that's occurring between streaming services right now and how that's playing out, I think that has an effect for kind of all of the streaming tech entities that play in that space. And then I do also think the economy also has a part to play as well. Agree, disagree?
Yeah,
Dish.
well, as you say that, I realize, and because my thing is, and we spoke about this earlier too, right? Like the companies have to do what makes sense for them, right?
Mm,
And I think when the economy in general is doing well and or your stock is doing well, you have a lot of priorities you can add to your list, right? You can be like, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. And when those things change, you have to change your priorities, which in turn means you have a lot of people that don't have things that any work to do, essentially, right? So I think again, it almost does boil down to the economy, but at the same time, like I don't know if we're at that place yet where the economy has dictated it. Like I think,
mm,
and not to be a negative Nancy, but I think there will be another situation where after the economy makes a turn, that's when there will be more situations like that. But I
mm-hmm,
also think the current market status of there's so many companies laying off, a lot of companies are not. Well, that's what I meant to say is that because of all those things, a lot of companies are now changing their flexible work policies,
mm-hmm,
right? They're saying, hey, you got to
mm-hmm.
come back into the office more
Power
so
shift.
because power, yeah, it's a power shift because you don't have those options anymore. Heck,
Mm-hmm,
some of you don't have some of I say some of you, that doesn't sound right, but some of us or some people don't have jobs anymore. So they will take whatever. So they're able to take that power back. Now, do I think this is the long term that we're going back to pre-pandemic? I don't think so. I think this is something that some employees are able to leverage because of the current status, but I think eventually the market will even out because what the workforce wants hasn't changed. It's just
mm-hmm.
what you take what you can get type of situation right now.
Yeah,
um
for sure. It is interesting to see how that has shifted in such a short amount of time. Like I think obviously during the pandemic, there was obviously like a legal federal like health mandate requiring most companies, unless you were fell within an exception, to adapt and figure out how to work from home. Like that was not a choice, it was a requirement, and we adapted. But like you're saying, like obviously that was proof and justification that so many roles are capable of being fully remote and still being fully functional and what's the word I'm looking for? Productive, even at higher rates working from home than they are in the office, especially in major cities where commute times come into play, for example. But it is interesting to see how so many organizations, most of the um, public announcements I've seen around this have been like large scale organizations. So I will say, like, my knowledge of smaller startup organizations, not as familiar with return to office policies that they've been rolling out. But I do know like a lot of the larger organizations we talked about are probably calling out a return to office, whether it's you have to be in office 3 days a week or you have to be back in office 100% of the time. And some individuals are revolting, as we've seen in public announcements too, and saying, that's not cutting it. But then it's also interesting to see as the supply and demand shifts, and obviously the supply of employees is much higher than demand right now because of layoffs, that the power shifts back into the company side and employees having to flex if they want to keep their job.
Well, yeah, I think that's I mean, I think we may have talked about this earlier. Regardless of what side you're on, where if you're an employer with a sea of candidates forever, or if you were an employer with a very competitive job market, and then if you're an employee with a lot of options or less options, either way, the word is flex. You have to be flexible. And that's the one way to ensure like things work out. But yeah, it's, and we titled this episode, is the sky falling? Because if you literally look at job market today versus 6 months ago, it's not remotely the same, right? You may have thought years have passed, because right back in when we started thinking about this podcast, 6 months ago, or now probably a little bit more than that, 90% of jobs were not 90, 75% ish of jobs were remote or hybrid. Now, if you look at LinkedIn, remote is probably like 10%, and hybrid is probably like another 25%, right? And hybrid can mean 4 days a week in the office now, right? Where back in the day it was 2 to 3 days. So, it's, I don't know, it's wild. The more I think about it, the more it's like pretty wild. And then I'm very curious to see, and I haven't been able to see it yet, but we'll probably get some data on in a few months of what happened to salaries. Because peak pandemic salaries, we were seeing these like total comp 400,000 plus for software engineers.
Time for me to learn how to code.
Right, or even like PMs were making like half of, you know what I mean? Like it was a lot. And I used to see these posts on Blind where it's like, oh, my TC from Microsoft is X and Meta's offering me X, and I was just like, whoa, right?
Shit.
Yeah, and I think Amazon doubled their base comp maximums and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of that going on. And now my thought process is, are those numbers changing, or is it just less people working? Like what are they looking at? Because it's January of 2023 as we're recording this, and we're not in a recession yet, but it's coming. I mean, I think it's pretty much looks like it's coming. And if it never gets here, hallelujah, this episode's wrong. But where I'm sitting right now, it's very much interesting. But
a possibility, yeah, for sure.
Crazy times.
I will also, this is not directly in line, but like acknowledge the aspect of the individuals who have been impacted by layoffs. I only know, like I still have my job today, thankfully, but I can only imagine like the fear and concern and stress and anxiety I had around if I was going to keep my job or not. And that still, just because times are crazy, we talked about like an upcoming recession, like, am I going to have a job in 6 months? There were like, if we're just talking about I think there were like 4 or 5 companies we named at the start of this episode that had mass layoffs in the thousands. That's alone 50,000 people who lost their job in the last 6 months. And that's a large margin there. It's probably shorter than that.
Much shorter.
I've seen, I know we talked about this too, that I've seen not so many people posting on LinkedIn about how they've been impacted, the toll it's taken on them, not only mentally but financially as well. And it's really disheartening, and scary and sad. And I would just say, like, from that perspective, it's just a lot going on for all those individuals right now too. And just like a wild time, like we were talking about before.
Yeah, and I think for, if you're listening to this, you're someone who was impacted, or if you're, laid off at all, it's like, so real quick, as I'm about to say that, I do want to summarize really quickly. So where are we at right now? Market's crazy. I think that's the simplest way you can put it. A lot of layoffs, change in work from home initiatives, and possibly changes in salaries. And then how do we get here? It comes down to, some of it is the pandemic, some of it is the hiring and the initiatives that were put in then, and then other parts of it is the looming recession, and other parts of it could be just a company in its normal cycle of, hey, like some things we were trying didn't work out. And
Mm-hmm.
again, we're not here to judge the companies, because they're a business and they need to take care of themselves and figure out what's best for them, and we totally get that. I will do one thing though. I will give a shout out to companies, and layoffs suck, but there I at least saw a couple of companies that did some cool, like Salesforce, 5 months paid, and you got a full years of health insurance,
Yeah.
like that, right? And they waited till after the holiday season to do their
Yeah.
layoffs. So, shout out to them. And I think Meta even did like 4 months pay and like 6 months
Mm.
of, you know what I mean? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
there are, even if your laying off isn't cool, but there's things you can do to make it nicer for the
Yeah.
people that you're affecting. But then if you have been affected, where are we going from here? You know, at the end of the day, we all know you're looking for a new opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and that means that has just become your new job, right?
Yep.
Regardless of what the market looks like, you know you can't wait for the market to get better, and though the market will get better for a lot of us, if we were out of a job, we have to find a new one. And for me, like, I got laid off in 2020 because of the pandemic, in I think March. And I
That was
actually
the
decided,
agency, right?
yeah, it was the
Agency
agency.
life.
And I decided, I personally, at that time, I was lucky, I'm single. At that time, I didn't even have a dog. I decided to take some time off. But when I was deciding to get back in the game, I was 8 hours a day minimum. I was doing things that were going to equal a new job, right? So whether that's applying to jobs, whether that's researching jobs, whether that is taking new certifications and new classes, whether that is, there's so many things. Like, I was literally picking out, making a resume, and then picking out like what a dream job would be, and then figuring out how my resume relates to that.
Mm.
I was networking 8 hours a day, right? And so, because a lot of times it's very, because applying to jobs on LinkedIn, and I'm sorry, this is a bit long-winded, but applying to jobs on LinkedIn has become so easy with like one click apply.
Yeah.
You apply to, quote unquote, apply to 30 jobs in like an hour and a half, and you're like, all right, I'm done for the day, right? But I think it takes so much more than that to get a job that you really care about.
Yeah. And I will say too, to that, right now too, because of the influx in the market and supply being so aggressively high, depending on your skill set, you're maybe previously it was like you were 1 in 100. Now it's like you're 1 in 1,000. So it's like also thinking about, sometimes applying now isn't enough. Like you need to find another entry point to that job.
Yeah, but one of the nice things actually that you could see from this situation, at least with the work from home, the work from home initiatives changing, is
Mm.
some of the competition's gone down a little bit, because before you
Mm.
were you in Miami were maybe fighting for someone in New York with your job because it was remote, or someone from
Mm, I get what you're
California.
saying.
But now you can stay local. And then look, if you look at jobs on LinkedIn and see like the remote jobs, they have thousands of resumes, but the local jobs, a lot of them don't, right?
Mm.
So you can, and again, we talked about flexibility. That's where that kicks in, where maybe you are in the office 5 days a week, right? Maybe you are um, having less PTO, whatever those changes may be. If you stay local, there are options for you there, right? And again, it may not be the most ideal, but it's again, you adjusting to the situation, this crazy sky is falling time period that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm like, if you have that ability to flex, like 100%, like that's something to be mindful of and thinking about right now, and how you set yourself up to move up higher on that list of applicants, for sure. Then I will also acknowledge, I do know there's like tons of people who moved out of big cities because of cost of living during the pandemic. So it's like, if you moved your whole family, you bought a house, and you're 4 hours outside a major city, what are you doing now? Like, you maybe you can move back, but unlikely. So it's like, it's just
But
interesting. But it's, again, like you're saying, it's like, where can you flex, if you can flex, and being mindful of like, how can you get creative to differentiate yourself?
yeah, and there's options out there. I mean, I think if, because the thing is the same thing, like, right, if you moved away from, let's say, San Francisco, if you don't have a job, are you moving back? No, because you it's I mean, it's even harder now, right? So it's
Mhm.
but it comes back to like a little bit of and I don't want to say it comes back to resiliency, because that's sometimes that's not fair, but I do think that if you're flexible, and a really big thing, networking. People like
Mhm.
helping people. Like, LinkedIn
Mhm.
is a beautiful, honestly, social media in general sometimes can be not so awesome, but LinkedIn is one of those places where it's like, yo, this is like a happy family. Like, everyone is trying to help everyone. So network in and out of LinkedIn, right?
Mhm.
LinkedIn is not sponsoring this video, but if LinkedIn, if you want to, you know where to go. But I think going forward, it comes down to that. But also, another thing that's very important to remember, no matter what is going on right now, it's, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
It has to get better. Um, just
History
my
shows us that it's cyclical for sure.
Yeah, and another thing, and if you saw, there's so many of these companies that were doing a lot of initiatives that they've slowed down. They're not stopping them, right? A lot of these companies are going to be hiring again. It's just the way that it works out. And I'm a hopeful person. I think this will be a pretty quick bounce. And please don't quote me on that, because I could be very wrong.
Mhm.
But I do think that it's just a matter of time before there's a bounce back. But at the end of the day, help your neighbor and seek
Mhm.
help from your neighbor. I think that's a
Yeah.
big one too.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. Yeah, it's some like obviously we can't predict when. I don't have those financial credentials, but I do totally agree. Like at some point we're going to bounce back. Um Everyone deals with like loss and job loss and things like this differently, so it's like, do what you need to do, take care of yourself. But like for me personally, like I always like I have to choose hope and like have to see the light and have to seek that out so I can move forward. Um so that would just be like my my recommendation to everyone, to like do what you need to do to process, but know that things will get better. Um and whether it's you shifting industries or moving into a new role or getting a new skill set or learning how to code, what have you. I think this times like this also really create opportunities for people to get really creative and shift and adapt in ways that they hadn't thought of before.
Fran, absolutely. And and like, so many people I've heard from people, and actually did happen to me too in my last layoff. It was the best thing that happened to them.
Mm.
Right. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna. For those of you who are
Mhm.
listening that have been affected, and you're like, not in a great place. I
Fuck you, I just lost
totally,
my job.
yeah. And I respect that. Right. I'm not trying to take away from that.
Yeah.
But it's just a lot of times we're in a place where we're not comfortable, but we just don't move because it's not shitty enough that we have to move. And sometimes this gives you an opportunity to get out of there. And yeah, and a huge thing that you said, Fran, was, yeah, get a new skill, like get a new certification. And sometimes that sounds like, oh, you're just telling me to fill the time. It's like, no, like, what if you are in IT, but you would love to be in like the media side of IT? It exists. There's jobs there. I'm not saying that they weren't affected. They may have been now, but as soon as this recession wraps up, it might be something you could jump into. Um,
Mhm.
and one thing that we know is, after a slowdown, everyone, again, think of when the pandemic first hit, how many layoffs happened like that? It was a bunch
Mhm.
of layoffs. And then within 3 months, the market was like begging these candidates to come back. Right.
Mhm.
And so when it comes down to it, I think we have to get ready for, they say when you pull a bowstring back, it sends the arrow out in
Mhm.
force. So right now the bowstring's
Yeah.
pulled back, but it's going to be let go, right? So just you
Yeah.
have to prepare for that. Um, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening today, in summary, it looks like the sky is falling. It will rise again at some point. Um, feel what you need to feel. I know everyone's experiencing different things right out there right now. Lean on your circle, build your craft. And we wish you all the best. If you have questions, comments, experiences you want to share, post in the comments, like, follow, and we will talk to you all next episode.
Sincerely, Fran and Shubho.